For as long as I can remember, I have heard the old adage, if it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, and looks like a duck, it's probably a duck. But I'm here to tell you that's not always true, especially if the duck is dementia or Alzheimer. So I want to share with you a situation that happened back in the fall of 2022. And my dad had one day told me that he wasn't smart anymore. And this came out of the blue. And I'm like, what do you mean you aren't smart anymore? And he just kept saying he wasn't smart anymore. And I was quite perplexed by this and wondered where this was coming from. And I immediately thought that he was referring to the aphasia that he had been experiencing since the stroke he had back in 2012. And for those who are not familiar, aphasia, which is defined as the loss of ability to understand or express speech, which is caused by brain damage. And in this case with my dad, it was caused by the stroke. However, my dad had a mild form of it, as he was able to talk and understand and be understood. However, he would have bouts where he couldn't say the word he was thinking of, or he'd say a different word other than the one he intended to say. And as a family, we thought he was really doing great with this because we know that there are a lot of cases that are much more severe. And we noticed that with him, his aphasia would kick in the most when he was in a stressful situation or he became self-conscious. So I didn't understand what was happening. I immediately tried to reassure him of just how great he's been doing with this and that he is smart. But he just seemed to get worse and appeared to be becoming depressed, which is something I've never, in all of my years, I've never seen my dad depressed. So this was very foreign to me. My brother tried to talk to him. My mom tried to talk to him as well. And a few weeks later, he didn't seem as depressed, but his personality seemed to change slightly. And so as time progressed, my mom started calling my brother and I late at night, saying he was being combative and uncooperative, again, which is something that was not like him at all. He wouldn't take his medicine, so we would have to coax him into taking the medicine. And I remember one night, I could hear him, when my mom called, I could hear him raising his voice at my mother, and I could tell she was really alarmed and concerned. This was not him. All at the same time, there was another occasion where she said he was playing with the TV remote control and taking it apart. And initially, I thought it was a bit odd, but I felt like he must be trying to put the batteries in, and maybe he's having a difficult time changing batteries. But I later found out what he was experiencing was called sundowners or sundowning, which is more commonly associated with dementia and Alzheimer's, in which a person experiences increased confusion as well as anxiety and agitation that normally begins late afternoon and continues on to the night, and basically when the sun goes down, thus the name sundowning. So several weeks later, my family was having our annual Zoom Christmas. Since we were all in different states, we would come together on Christmas via Zoom and open our gifts together. And I had which I normally do, mailed their gifts to them and sent my dad things I knew he wanted and would love, especially after all he had been going through the last 2 months. So on this particular morning, he was quite jovial, more jovial than I had seen in a little bit. But he was slightly over the top jovial, if that makes any sense. And he also looked different, but I couldn't really put my finger on it. My mom had told me earlier in the week that she had taken him to the doctor. And at that point, she had given me all of the details, what the doctor said. But after that, she told me that they thought he might have congestive heart failure. She prescribed Lasix to him, which is like a water pill to help remove any of the fluid, and thought that the confusion could be the beginning of dementia. And this really kind of rubbed me the wrong way. Could be I was in denial, or, you don't want to hear these type of things about my dad. But let me go back, because I wanted to explain for those who might not be familiar with congestive heart failure. That occurs when the heart's muscle begins to weaken or to become stiff, and it can't pump blood efficiently through the body, and we know the body needs the blood and oxygen. So it causes the blood to back up and fluid to congest in the lungs, the liver, and like the lower part of the body. And that's why sometimes they'll make sure they check a patient's feet and legs to make sure there's no swelling, because you can see that as an outward symptom on occasion. So, and he had congestive heart failure a few years ago after a trip we had, but he, was given treatment. He bounced right back, and there was no confusion or anything. But I was really concerned when my mom told me that the doctor didn't plan on seeing him for another 2 weeks. Like, that's an awful long time if you think somebody has congestive heart failure. So that kind of had my antennas up. And then a day or two after Christmas, my mom called and said that my dad was giving her a hard time, said that he needed to go to the bathroom, but he didn't know where the bathroom was. And that immediately set off alarms. I'm like, what do you mean? They had lived in that house since I was probably 1 year old. So I knew he knew where the bathroom was, and for whatever reason, she thought he was joking, which I think was also a defense mechanism, because you don't want to believe that something is so bad that he can't remember, where the bathroom was. So at that point, I immediately got on the phone trying to reach his doctor, but was told that she was away. And after explaining the situation to the nurse practitioner who returned my call, she said that he needed to be taken to the hospital, which my mom did. He was immediately admitted, confirmed congestive heart failure, sometimes known as CHF. But unfortunately, the confusion seemed to escalate in a major way, and they had to have a sitter in the room with him at all times, because he would try to pull out the IVs and the monitors. He also attempted to leave. He had become extremely combative and disruptive, to the point at one time they had to call security. And this truly broke my heart, because this is not my dad. My dad, who I've known all my life, he hated confrontation and was always so mild-mannered, with one exception. When he was on the basketball court, he was all about that. But, walking around day to day, he was always so calm and at ease. So I was really startled by this. Now, I will say, and I have learned that especially in older people, when they are in a hospital, you can have someone who went into the hospital just fine, but being in the hospital, they tend to get confusion and experiencing sundowners because it's a new environment. But we knew that some of this started before he even was admitted, and I guess being there just made things progress. So he was in the hospital, I want to say, for about a week and a half, when the doctor that he was seeing told me that a new doctor was coming on to the case. And I do want to say this. That first doctor I was not happy with. And we will talk about that in subsequent meetings, about what to do and how to handle a situation when you have a doctor that you're not comfortable with. However, in this case, the new doctor that came on to his case was excellent. He took his time talking to me and my mom, asking questions, and he discovered that there was fluid actually leaking onto the liver, which was causing liver congestion, and that is what was causing the confusion. So at that point, he prescribed a medication that would cure this, and he told me, and he was such conviction that he said, listen, once he starts taking this medication, he will be back to his normal self. It might take a day, it might take a few days, it might take a few weeks. He said, but I assure you, the confusion is going to stop. And this man never lied. I think it was a matter of days. And it was as if a light switch was flipped on, because he one day woke up and was like, okay, so what's been going on? It was as if he knew he had been away. And he was wondering, okay, why am I here? What's happening? And he was sharp. He was so mentally sharp. He was actually better than he had been since that 2012 stroke. We were like mesmerized, like he was a walking miracle as far as we were concerned. And he was like the dad we had before that initial stroke. It was truly, truly a miracle. And I continue, even though my dad is no longer here, I continue to thank God for that, because we got him back for all that time up until the day he passed away. But I wanted to share that with you because that experience, I learned a few things. One, like I said in the beginning, just because it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck doesn't mean it's a duck. I think that there's a tendency that when older patients come into a hospital or a doctor and there's some level of confusion, they automatically want to give that diagnosis of dementia or Alzheimer's. And in fact, there are so many other things that can cause confusion in older adults. One of the biggest culprits is a UTI, a urinary tract infection. And older people, they can become very confused and even have symptoms of sundowning. But once the antibiotics are given and the infection is treated, they're back to where they were. But it is startling as a child, as a loved one. You don't want to see this happen. And I look back and I wish that I would have taken action at the onset of things when my dad first said that he was confused. I wish I would have looked into it, got him to a doctor then. And I do feel bad about that, but I'm also learning now to give myself grace, because we all do the best that we can do in a situation that we're in. And you don't know what you don't know. This is why I feel so compelled to share my story, because if it helps at least one person, it is well worth me jumping out of my comfort zone and becoming the person I wish I had to bounce things off and to know that I'm not alone. This is a difficult journey, seeing the one you loved, especially your parents, get older and become in a weakened state and become people that you don't quite recognize. And I think that sometimes when we see certain symptoms, there is a desire in us to brush it off because we don't want to accept what the reality could be. But the reality may not always be what we think it is. And then we also have to come to grips with there are certain things that come with getting older. But the most important thing is to learn to give yourself grace, not to isolate yourself, to reach out for support, because the truth of the matter is a lot of times people don't know what you're going through, and they're not going to know unless you share it. But I want you to know that this is a safe place to share. I just pray that you can learn something from my experience. Until now, no, I'm praying for all of you, no matter what part of this journey that you are on. Know that you are loved and thought about. Be blessed.